The alarms tore through my ship before I had even finished my morning council, and my first thought was not fear, it was disbelief, because no one attacks a sovereign cruiser inside a protected corridor, and yet the floor was already shaking beneath me. I am Aelthrena, ruler of 11 star systems, and in that moment, I was simply a mother running through a bleeding hallway, trying to reach my daughter before the hull finished tearing itself apart. 2 cycles ago, none of this would have made sense to me. 2 cycles ago, my only concern was why my daughter Sylvain, heir to everything I had built, could not stop talking about a human soldier named Callum Reyes. He was unremarkable in every measurable way. Not especially strong by our standards, not especially fast, not gifted with any of the enhancements our own honor guard trained for decades to earn. When I first saw him standing at attention during a diplomatic exchange, I assumed he was decoration, a formality demanded by the Terran Assembly so their delegation would not appear entirely defenseless. Sylvain disagreed the moment she saw him carry an injured engineer through a collapsing reactor corridor, 4 kilometers, in full gravity, without checking the radiation levels first. She called it beautiful, I called it reckless. We argued about it more times than I can count, and every time, she said the same thing. You don't understand them yet, Mother, but you will. I did not believe her, until today. The raiders came out of nowhere, an unmarked vessel with no colors and no warning, the kind of ship that exists only to take what does not belong to it. They struck our escort first, and by the time our sensors registered the threat, we were already alone in open space with a breach tearing through the lower decks. I ran toward the observation corridor, because that was where Sylvain had been only minutes earlier, and the closer I got, the more the ship groaned around me, metal complaining under pressure it was never built to survive. When I reached the doorway, I found her already there, and beside her, blood running down the side of his face, was Callum. He was pressing his shoulder against a support strut, trying to hold a breach that should have needed 6 armored soldiers to manage, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. Behind him, 3 of my own honor guard were shouting instructions to raiders through the gap, buying seconds, and he was the one giving those instructions. Get the Queen to the escape pod, he shouted, not even turning to look at me. I'll hold the corridor. That is not a survivable position, I told him, because I had already run the calculations in my head, the way I run every calculation, out of habit, out of duty, out of 40 cycles of ruling through logic instead of instinct. A single body against a breach that size, against raiders carrying plasma cutters, was not a plan. It was a sacrifice dressed up as a plan. He looked at me the way he always looked at difficult things, like they were simply the next problem to solve, rather than a wall to be afraid of. With respect, ma'am, he said, I didn't run the numbers before deciding my crew was worth protecting. Please go. I did not go. I want to be honest about that, because pretending otherwise would dishonor what happened next. I stood in that doorway with my daughter, and I watched a single human hold a breaking wall of metal in place with nothing but strength and stubbornness, counting the seconds, because counting was the only thing I understood about what I was seeing. 91 seconds. That is how long it took for reinforcements to punch through from the other side and seal the breach properly. 91 seconds is not long by the standard of a battle, but it is an eternity when you are watching someone hold back disaster with his own body, because he has decided, without any calculation at all, that the people behind him matter more than the odds in front of him. When it was finally over, when the corridor sealed and the alarms softened into the low hum of a ship recovering from injury, Callum collapsed. Not dramatically, not the way stories describe such things, but simply the way anyone collapses when their body finally admits how much it has been asked to give. Sylvain caught him before he reached the floor. I expected panic from her. I expected the frightened, uncertain reaction of a young heir who had just watched someone nearly die in front of her. Instead, what I saw on her face was recognition, as though something she had believed for a long time had just been proven true in front of witnesses. We carried him to the medical bay together, my guards and I, and while the healers worked to close the wound above his eye and steady the bruising along his ribs, I stood at a small distance and allowed myself, for a few private minutes, to simply be a mother instead of a sovereign. Why him? I finally asked Sylvain. Why this species? They do not calculate. They do not weigh outcomes the way we are taught to from birth. They simply throw themselves at problems. A properly trained strategist would find a way around. Sylvain did not look away from Callum's sleeping face when she answered. That's exactly it, Mother. They don't sit down and calculate whether you're worth saving. They just decide you are, and then they spend everything they have making that decision true. I did not have an answer for her, not immediately, because in 40 cycles of rule, I had never once built a strategy around a decision made before the math was finished. Our people are taught patience. We are taught to weigh cost against benefit, to preserve strength for the moment it will matter most, to never spend more than a situation requires. It has kept our systems safe for longer than most civilizations survive at all. And yet, here was a soldier who spent everything he had on a hallway that logic said he should have abandoned, and somehow, because of that, we were all still breathing. Later that evening, after the ship's engineers confirmed the hull was stable and the raiders had been driven off by our recovered escort ships, I asked to speak with Callum alone. He was still recovering, propped upright in a medical bed with a bandage across his brow, looking somehow both exhausted and entirely at ease, as though nothing unusual had happened to him that day. You could have died, I told him, because it seemed important that someone say it plainly. I know, he said, without any drama in his voice at all. Then why did you stay? He considered the question for a moment, longer than I expected, as though he wanted to give me an honest answer rather than a comfortable one. Where I come from, ma'am, we don't always wait until we're sure something will work before we try. Sometimes waiting for certainty means someone doesn't make it. I'd rather be wrong and alive with everyone else than right and standing over people I could have saved. It was such a simple thing to say, and yet it unsettled something in me that 40 cycles of careful rule had never touched. I had built my reign on certainty, on always knowing the odds before committing my people to anything. It had kept us strong. It had also, I realized as I sat beside his bed, kept me at a careful distance from the kind of loyalty that makes someone hold a breaking wall shut with nothing but their own body and their own will. Sylvain found me there an hour later, and she sat quietly beside me without saying anything at first, the two of us simply watching him sleep. You still don't fully understand them, do you? She finally said, and there was no accusation in it, only gentle amusement. No, I admitted. I don't think I ever will. Not completely. That's all right, she said. I didn't either, not until today. I just knew I wanted to be near someone who thought like that. Someone who decides you're worth everything, before he's even finished counting the cost. I thought of Callum standing in that doorway, blood on his face, refusing to move even when every reasonable calculation told him to. I thought of my own guards, trained for decades, standing frozen for half a second longer than he had, simply because they had been taught to measure the danger before acting, while he had simply acted, and let the danger measure itself. Perhaps that is the difference between our peoples, I said slowly, testing the thought as I spoke it. We calculate our worth before we commit. They commit, and let the outcome decide their worth afterward. Sylvain smiled, the same bright smile she'd worn every time she described one of his small, reckless kindnesses over the past 2 cycles, the same smile I had never quite understood until today. That's why I couldn't stop watching him, Mother. Not because he's fearless. He isn't. I've seen him afraid. But he never once let that fear decide what he was willing to do for someone else. I sat with that thought long after she left the room, long after the medical bay quieted and the ship settled back into its ordinary hum, the alarms silent, the breach sealed, the raiders driven back into whatever dark corner of space they had come from. I had ruled for 40 cycles. I had negotiated 1,000 treaties, outlasted a dozen rival houses, and built a reign on the careful, patient weighing of risk and reward. I understood statecraft the way I understood my own heartbeat. I still did not fully understand humans, not their strange, sudden bravery, not their willingness to spend everything before the numbers were finished. But watching my daughter's hand rest gently over his, watching the quiet certainty in her eyes as she waited for him to wake, I finally understood why she had stopped trying to make sense of it and simply decided to stay.